Hey, Tom here from Made by Loop, and in this video I'm going to run through the spoke script for After Effects and show you just how powerful it can be for creating repeated radial designs like this in After Effects. So let's get started. I built the spoke script because I wanted a really easy way to rotate layers around a circle in After Effects, and there wasn't really anything else that did the job. So to show you how it all works, I've got a composition set up here that just has a background and a single text layer, and I've got the spoke script docked over here already as well. So what I'll do is I'll select my text layer, I'll leave the number of copies here in the script panel as 10, and then I'll hit the go button. Instantly, you can see that the spoke script has created a host of new layers for us. It's repeated our layer around a circle, and it's given us some extra control layers here as well. So first of all, we have two null objects here, called edge point and center point. And these are used to control the circle around which our objects are then repeated. The circle itself is represented by this layer here, the spoke circle guide. This icon here on this layer shows that it's a guide layer. And if I right click, we can see that the guide layer option is checked here as well. So what this means is, if we were to render this scene out, the circle here wouldn't be seen. It's just a visual guide for us to work with. So to demonstrate what these three layers are for, I'll first select the edge point null here and drag it out slightly. You can see that what this does is it expands the circle our layers are repeated around and creates more space for us to work with. If we select the center point null layer and move this one around instead, you can see that the circle center point now follows it perfectly. The closer we get to our edge control, the smaller our circle becomes. The further away we get, the larger the circle becomes too. With just a single click then, you can see how Spoke has rigged up a radial repeater for us in seconds that's easy to customize via these control layers. And because these control layers are null objects, you can even animate the position, for example. So let's say we wanted to have our layers move from the center and have them expand outwards. All I would have to do is copy the center point position to our edge layer, add a keyframe, move the time marker along, and then move the edge layer outwards to add another keyframe, and this creates quite a nice animation of our layers moving from the center and exploding outwards. The next thing we'll take a look at is the extra control options, and these are located on the center point layer. So with the center point null control selected, I'll come up here to the effects control panel, and you can see that we have two options: rotation offset and point to center. The rotation offset control allows you to change the angle at which each layer is positioned around the circle. So if I click and drag this value down, you can see that our layers shift position along the circle. Again, if you wanted to, you could animate this value and create a nice animation of our layers popping out and sliding around the circle. It all depends on what you're looking to create. I'll set this value back to 1 for now, and then I'll come to the second option, point to center, and I'll activate the checkbox. So just as the name suggests, what this option does is it points all of our layers to the center of the circle. And you can now see how Spoke got its name, because all these text layers are kind of like the spokes of a wheel. With the center point option enabled, we could then come back to our rotation offset value again, and move the edge point around a bit, and this opens up the option to create some really interesting looking designs and animations. So as well as these two options here in the effects control panel, it's also worth noting that you can change the transform values of this central null to customize everything even further. We've already seen how changing the position increases the size of the circle, but we can also change the anchor point too, which creates a really interesting effect when the point to center setting is enabled, because it's shifting the point the layers are looking at slightly. We can also change the scale, so if I unlink the values here, we can then experiment with the X and Y scale. And you can see that this morphs the circle and the repeated layers all move with it. So if I just reset the scale to 100, I'll finally come to the rotation. And if I change this value, you can see that we can rotate our layers around the center point, and it really creates a nice animation. Spoke doesn't just work with text layers either. You can use any type of layer within After Effects. So, as we've seen, you can use text layers, but you can also use shape layers, even images or video if you wanted to rotate them around a circle. So let's take a look at a more advanced example that uses the spoke script and shape layers as well. So in this comp, I've got a background layer set up. And what I'll do is I'll come up here to the rectangle tool. If you don't have this bar, then come to the Window, Tools option, and make sure that it's enabled. So what I'll do is I'll click and hold the square button here to bring up the submenu, and I'll choose the polygon tool. Then in the composition window, I'll click and drag to create a new shape layer. But before releasing the shape, I'm going to press the up key on my keyboard to add some extra points and create a nice hexagon. I'll quickly center the anchor point using this handy reposition anchor point script, and then I'll align this layer to the center of my composition. The next thing I want to do is come down to my shape layer options and open up the polystar section, and then open up the transform settings. Now, this is quite important because shape layers have multiple transform options, and when we're using the spoke script, you want to make sure that you're editing these transform values here rather than the overall layer's transform values. And this is because spoke applies expressions to these transform values, which we don't want to interfere with. So in this polystar's transform options, I'm going to option or alt-click the rotation value to open up the expression settings. And I'll type time * 100. So what this little expression does is it creates a constant animation as we scrub through the timeline. It's multiplying the time by 100. So now we have a rotating hexagon set up. I'll come to the spoke script panel, and I'll choose 20 copies this time, and I'll hit go. Again, the script has done its thing, and we have all of our duplicated layers and our control layers. I'll select the edge point again, and I'll just drag it out slightly. If I just hide our guide layer and hit space to preview everything, you can see that we've really quickly created this really cool looking shape animation, and it's almost like an optical illusion. The more I look at it, the more I can see almost like a 3D depth to it, even though it's entirely 2D. So even without much customization, on its own the script will enable you to really quickly create a nice radial repeater effect. But the real power comes from experimenting with all of the different values to create some really unique looking designs and animations. So to quickly demonstrate some experimentation, I could quickly add some movement to our edge point, for example, by setting a couple of keyframes. I could then add a loop out ping pong expression. And so what this will do is it'll cycle back and forth between our keyframe movement. I'll preview this, and you can see that it's created a really nice looking animation with our repeated layers. I'll just remove this movement animation for now, and then what I'll do is I'll play around with the rotation offset again, like we saw earlier. So this is actually pretty cool. It's created a more segmented design instead. And I'll try enabling the point to center option, and you can see that even just checking this option gives you a completely different style to what we had before. Let's just change the rotation offset back to 1, see how it looks as a full circle. And there we go. You can see even just by checking this point to center option, it creates a really nice and different looking animation. Again, the key with this script is just to experiment and have fun with it. Play around with animating all of the different properties and options. Even something as simple as changing the easing on any of your animated properties will throw up a whole different style of animation and a completely different design in some cases. So there we have it. That's a quick look at the spoke radial repeater script for After Effects. You can read more about the script via the link in the description. If you like this video, do hit like and subscribe, and visit madebyloop.co.uk for more motion design resources.